We're talking a little bit of Pitt basketball. It might be football camp season, but don't disregard the Pitt basketball recruiting trail. We're welcoming in Jason Jordan today to talk about Ty-Laur Johnson, Jaylen Curry, and others, and we are going to examine the state of where Pitt men's basketball can go from here. It's all coming up on this episode of Locked On Pitt.
Are Locked On Pitt, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Panthers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Folks, welcome back here to the Locked On Pitt podcast. As always, I'm your host, Nick Faribaugh, here today with a very special guest, Jason Jordan, the Director of Basketball Recruiting at Sports Illustrated. Jason, happy to have you on the show today.
Oh, man, happy to be here for sure. Definitely.
Pitt, a program that trying to reclaim their national prominence, and Jeff Capel trying to right the ship. He's now going to be in year 5 and has a pretty solid 2023 recruiting class with Marlon Barnes and Carlton Carrington, but looking to add to that, and the main target, their number one guard target right now, Ty-Laur Johnson, has really had a good summer, and he's shot up their board so much so they're trying to get him on campus sometime this month. What about this game would make Jeff Capel and Tim O'Toole and this staff really enamored with him?
Oh, he's a pit bull of a point guard, man. He's a two-way guy who's just a floor general extraordinaire. So he's scoring on all 3 levels, but he's really adept at getting downhill. He's a guy that you're not going to keep him in front of you, and he's always got his eyes up on a swivel. He's seeing the play develop two moves before the defense collapses, right? So he's that guy. So super high IQ guy. And so the other thing is that he bigger than anything, we could talk about his 3-level scoring, talk about him going down here. He's an energy guy. So he's gonna bring the energy vocally, he's gonna bring the energy in the locker room, and he's obviously gonna bring the energy on the court. So he's a guy who's gonna lead by example and lead by example, and he's going to be like a vocal leader. I'm sorry, I got tripped up. And to your point, an amazing summer. He was MVP of EYBL Louisville. I think he hit a walk-off game winner there. And I was just at Peach Jam, and Jeff and Jason were following him everywhere, and rightfully so. So he's definitely a guy that is a priority guy for Jeff, and rightfully so.
When you look at the landscape of the Ty-Laur Johnson recruitment, and it's blown up recently, obviously, you have those New York schools in there. Ole Miss offered recently. Pitt's been in there for the long run, has been on him for a very long time, and that relationship goes back deep with them. What do you put on that type of relationship in a recruitment like this when Jeff Capel and Jason Capel and Tim O'Toole are trying to get a guy like that to come on to a class? How much does something like that matter?
Relationships matter. I mean, big time, especially in recruiting. Unfortunately, sometimes it just depends. It's not one of those things that's like, got a relationship with everybody. No, if you've been a guy who's been there from the beginning and we've gotten close, and that is definitely going to weigh heavy when we're writing down the pros and cons after all the visits are over and we're ready to decide, and we got to get this thing hashed out. I've seen that. I've actually been in on those talks. So the emotional connection there is certainly going to matter. And Jeff is like best in show at that. Like Jeff wins. I always say Jeff wins the den. Right. So when he's in that den, he's going to win with your parents. He's going to win with you. And because he's so real. He's a straight shooter. Jeff's my guy. Jeff's a straight shooter. He's going to tell you exactly how he feels. And people love that, and people respect that, and people flock to that. So that's why he's he's always had a history of being a great recruiter and obviously a great coach. But I definitely think that will play a part for sure in this specific recruitment. I have seen situations where, I'm close, but that just made the phone call tougher. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, I've seen it with Pitt. Everybody loves Jeff. Be clear, everybody loves Jeff Capel. I just talked to. It's so funny. Last week I talked to. I won't say who, but because I don't want to get y'all mad. But it was a 5-star kid. Top 10, and he was like, man, his dad. I was having dinner with his dad, and he was like, man, Jeff Capel, and I love Jeff Capel. Maybe I should have went there, so you want that. It's like, oh yeah, that's great. But no, you want that. You want that. So you want to stack the deck. I'm a percentage guy. So put all the percentages in your favor. And that relationship building is a big part of it.
Now, with a guy like Ty-Laur, he's a point guard, but Pitt just got a really good young point guard. Ty-Laur Johnson is obviously the name I'm talking about here, and Jeff Capel landing Ty-Laur Johnson is going to matter. Now, I know a lot of people obviously think Ty-Laur Johnson's probably going to try and be a one and done and may not be here next year, but does that weigh on a guy like Ty-Laur Johnson who maybe looks at, say, the Pitt point guard room and says, well, you just got a top 50 recruit the year before that could be at my position?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they look at the depth chart for sure, and that's why I don't know if that situation will be over soon, because it's a wait and see, especially with Dior, because he was once upon a time considered to be a one and done for sure, and now it's kind of like, could he be? And I think that's the mindset that everybody's in. I don't, but he's obviously super talented, so we'll see how that works out. But as far as a recruit, looking at the depth chart and looking at who's there, I think they could play together, though. Now be clear. And a lot of coaches love a 2-point guard lineup. So it's like whoever has the ball, get ready, get out and go. And that's kind of what people are going to, interchangeable pieces, especially in the backcourt and on the perimeter. So a lot of coaches are really liking to flood the hardwood with playmakers all over the court. So that's another sell I'm sure they're going to have. If he's here, you guys can play together, and they could. It's not even just. I think Ty-Laur is probably a better scorer than Dior, but they're both, they're dogs on the court. Both of them, when they're engaged, when Dior's engaged, and that is typically the case with Dior. He brings a lot of passion and energy, so I think they could play together, and I think that's part of the thing that they're selling them on, I'm sure.
Folks, we'll get right back to the conversation with Jason Jordan, but if you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor. You don't have to wait for any new flavors, because guess what? Covered in chocolate, you have it. It's indulgent cookie dough. That's right. Built has done it again. Cookie dough chuck pumps are light. They have that chewy cookie dough chunks and texture that you just love and cannot stop having. Run to Built.com to snag a box for you and the fam, and it will be a perfect treat. Or you could find a really good hiding place and hide them for yourself and just really keep them because you love them that much. Folks, what's great about Built is that the bar is made of collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently, so it will give you more health benefits. All you have to do is go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCK15 and get 50% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 50% off at Built.com. So Ty-Laur, I think, said he's going to take official visits. Now, I don't know how much you've heard about Pitt in this recruitment, but what are the chances that Pitt potentially maybe, say, gets Ty-Laur on campus and could potentially bring him here, and maybe that commitment doesn't come till later, but they still get him on Pittsburgh's campus?
I think they'll get him on the campus. I think they have a good relationship, and I think they've shown him that they want him. I think I saw, they were present, and guys, that matters to guys. So I talked to all the guys. I'm like, did you see who was over there? Oh yeah, I saw who was over there. I talked to mothers. I was looking, who was at our games. They said that we were priority, and so they look at that. That stuff matters, and they might say, on the record, it doesn't matter. Just like they say rankings don't matter on the record. That's not true. So yeah, I think they've done a great job of showing him that how bad they want him. And that's I feel like that'll win. And definitely I'm confident it'll get him on campus. I would be shocked if he didn't come on campus.
That's great news, because there's no official visit scheduled yet, but
right.
It really wants to get him on campus. Another guy that we do know is going to be on campus at some point in September, whether it be it's going to be for a football game, whether it's the backyard brawl or the Tennessee game. And it is a guy that Jeff Capel has plenty of connections with down in North Carolina, and Jaylen Curry. And this has been a guy that we've heard a lot about with Pitt, Jeff Capel, and the connections he has. Jaylen Curry very close with Jeff Capel, but what type of player are we looking at here in Jaylen Curry?
Well, that's another guy. Jeff and Jason were definitely they brought the whole staff out a couple times for him, and rightfully so. He's another one, and he played with Trey Parker for Boo Williams, and so I was always curious to see how that would mesh because they're both ball dominant guards. But Jaylen's more of a creative playmaker who's gonna facilitate, and he's not as animated as say a Trey Parker or a Aliar Johnson or even a Ty-Laur, but he's like a guy who's going to facilitate first, and then but he's also a dynamic scorer, so he's getting to his spots. You're not going to keep him from getting to his spots, but he's always surveying. So I think he's more of a pass first guy, but you're swinging it around. He's knocking down that perimeter jump shot efficiently. He didn't shoot as well at Peach Jam. But I think that had a lot to do with Trey Parker just kind of going off and him deferring to him in that regard. So, but once again, an interchangeable piece in the backcourt. He does like to have the ball in his hands, a creator, a playmaker extraordinaire, and super athletic too. So, and he can play, to your point about it, do they worry about point guards being there? He can play with another dominant guard. Trey Parker was dominant. So, that's a guy who they're really prioritizing too, because they were there at all his games as well. So it'll be interesting to see. Like you said, he has a lot of ties there, and it'll be interesting to see how that winds down as we go into the next couple months.
We hear all the time about AAU relationships and how they tie into all this stuff, but we know Jeff is very close in that North Carolina area, but specifically with Boo Williams, though. Those two guys have a really good relationship, and every time you talk to Jaylen Curry about Pitt, that comes up, that relationship comes up. And now that they're going to get him on campus, does it seem to you at all that maybe Pitt, I know there's a lot of good teams in here for Jaylen Curry, but it almost seems like Pitt has somewhat of an inside track just to start off the recruitment right away.
Right. So to piggyback off the earlier point, relationships, they're going to give you a little bit of an extra push, and every little bit helps, right? So, those ties certainly, I think it'll definitely, because what do we care about? Is he coming? Do I think it'll definitely? I don't know that'll definitely make him a Pitt lock, but if it helps, that's an amazing thing. I think again, I'm a percentage guy, so every percentage in your favor is a great thing, especially for a guy like him who's got Florida State and Ole Miss and Texas A&M and Virginia Tech all, grabbing at his heels as well. So you need every little bit to count, and that counts big for most recruits and their families.
Yeah, and you look Ole Miss, Pitt, South Carolina, Alabama, lots of good teams in there.
Yeah.
Pitt has a scheduled date with him on campus. He will be coming to campus September 1st, so that will be really good for an official visit. So that's a big land there for Jeff Capel in terms of that official visit cycle. Now, Jason, before we get out of here, I want to talk to you about Carlton Carrington, because he was the big commit for Pitt in June, right after Ty-Laur Johnson committed in the 2022 class. And the one thing that has always been worried about Pitt fans is that Carrington was a guy that Pitt got in on early on, and that he was going to blow up, and the big schools were going to call coming, and everything was going to kind of descend from there. What did you see from Carlton Carrington this summer that made him such an impressive player?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing was that he was consistent, right? So, I'm big on that. I weigh heavy on consistency. So, at every stop, at every session, he was putting up numbers against whoever, right? So the consistency was the thing that stood out to me. And again, just the versatility. Again, we talk a lot about interchangeable parts. I often talk about interchangeable parts, specifically in the backcourt, because that's how you're built to win at the collegiate level. If you look at the past national champions, there were a lot of interchangeable parts, and I hate to say positionless because this becomes so cliche, but Carlton was definitely one of those guys this summer, and so on the sidelines, I would hear a lot of chatter among recruiting experts and stuff like that. It's like, oh man, you know what you're going to get there, and so there's a safety in that, and there's something to be said for somebody who you can count on for production at specific high level, whether we're playing a team we're supposed to beat or a guy who's supposed to be better than you. And so I think that's where he kind of made his name and fit that mold.
Yeah, it's turning out to be a pretty solid 23 class, at least the start of that 23 class. Pitt trying to land Ty-Laur Johnson, Jaylen Curry, certainly more in that discussion, but those appear to be the top two right now. Jason, thanks for coming on. Tell them where they can find your stuff, follow you, all of that great stuff.
Yeah, so on Instagram, Jason C. Jordan, I see you have the Twitter thing right there. That is very cool. At SI.com, college basketball section. I'm there all the time, so come check me out.
Well, folks, I really hope you all enjoyed that segment and with Jason Jordan. Obviously got some great insight there on Jeff Capel, Ty-Laur Johnson, Jaylen Curry, Carlton Carrington, and who Pitt is looking at on the recruiting trail. Even in this period here in August, Pitt is working. And we didn't talk about this, but this is also big. Pitt hosted a ton of 2024, 2025 local kids. And I want to talk about that specifically because this was a really busy week. Tuesday specifically, Pitt hosted a number of guys, obviously headlined by Maleek Thomas out of Lincoln Park, who was a big-time recruit. We're talking 5-star Malik Thomas is, and that is a really good connection between him, Jason Capel. This kid can ball out. He's explosive. He's quick. He's got great handles. He's really good. And so Thomas, a shooting guard, a guy that can really shoot the rock. Man, Pitt hosted 3 top local guys. They hosted Maleek Thomas, Royce Parham, and Aliar Maluk. So you have these 3 kids all from the Pittsburgh area, and it feels really good to know that there is that talent well there, but Pitt has to close on those guys, right? The talent has to come here in order for anything to be successful in that regard. And so that is something that Pitt is going to have to work with, and they're going to have to make sure matures and gets together, because that is the start of where a core is built. If you can build the core in your own backyard, it makes it a lot easier, right? And Pitt, it's not really their fault. Pittsburgh just isn't really the producer of basketball, right? Pittsburgh doesn't have a ton of NBA players. They do have a few. You look at guys like Cam Johnson, for example, and in the past, DeJuan Blair. But mostly this is a lot of kids play baseball in this town. A lot of kids play football. Obviously, Western PA has that football fabric that I would put on it. So you would expect a lot of those kids to go to football. Look at Rodney Gallagher, for example, right? Pretty good basketball player that probably could have played at a Division I level, at the very least at an A10 level, if not an ACC, Big 12, Big 10, whatever you might call it level. This is a guy that got pushed to football, and he's a really good football player too, but he could have been pushed to hoops in elsewhere areas. So Pitt has to land these 3 kids because they're different. First of all, they're different styles. And second of all, they're very talented. And I mean that. Different styles. Royce Parham out of North Hills. This kid is lengthy. He's a problem on the defensive end. He's great in terms of just defending it outside the rim. You want that perimeter defense. And that's something. And Malik is a huge kid that moves really well for his size. And he is a guy that's able to shoot the 3 and is able to do a lot of things and is able to back you down. He's a really solid player. And these are kids that all know the Pitt program. They grew up just around the Pitt program. So they know this. So Pitt is a well-known commodity to them. And so these guys are going to be key to landing. And so you look at that. And then you look at another guy that'll make a lot of people happy. How about RJ Greer? Yeah, Greer, that last name. That's the son of Ricardo Greer. And so Pitt is already dipping now into a legacy recruit out of Ohio, right? This is big. And RJ Greer has offers from Florida, Michigan, Cincinnati, others as well. But he has really become a national recruit. He can shoot the rock, plays a lot like his dad, and he's really good. And this is a legacy recruit that Pitt really is going to want to get. So you look at those 4 guys in the classes of 24 and 25, and that's a dynamic group. And that's a group that Pitt is really going to want to close upon, because you're not going to get opportunities like this. And more importantly, opportunities like those guys coming out of the WPIAL, or a legacy recruit, a really good legacy recruit. We're not talking about even a reach here, right? We're talking about a guy that has absolutely got that offer sheet and has that upside to be a significant contributor. So these are all very important lands. For Jeff Capel, obviously the focus has to be on this year. You have to win this year with the guys you have. But even in 23, now that you have guys like, say, Carlton Carrington and Marlon Barnes, the moving train doesn't stop. If you're looking at 24, 25, we're looking at past 22 here, and we're trying to build something. And you look at that and you say, well, Pitt has done well for themselves in 22. Well, where did they go from here? These 4 guys are huge pieces of that equation, right? They are big time additions to the checklist. I mean, these are kids that are very talented, that have that local fabric, that know what Pitt basketball was like when it was electric. They've heard stories about this. They know it, especially RJ Greer. He knows what that's all about, right? He's been around that his whole life. And Ricardo Greer certainly fits that mold and understands what football is like, and what successful Pitt men's basketball is like, and what a successful Pitt program can do. And you saw it with football last year, and then you saw it with basketball not too long ago. And so these kids aren't going to remember a ton of it, but they can see it and they know it, especially Pittsburgh-based kids. It's the only basketball ticket in town, really, that is, as widespread as it can be. And that's important to these kids, because if you're going to land them, you're going to have to sell them on a hometown flair. You're going to have to sell them on more than just say, yeah, you're from Pittsburgh, so come here. There's got to be some flair attached to that. There's got to be some tangible benefit for them, right? Like, what do they gain from coming and staying home? That's going to be the big thing to answer. And Jeff Capel is going to need to be the one to answer that. If he has a successful 2022 and that Pete gets rocking, and you see the type of atmosphere the Pete can be when it is at its best, I think there will be a lot of more interest from these kids in terms of who come to Pitt and potentially landing them. But it's a big week to even get them on campus. I know they're local, but sometimes that doesn't even happen. So getting them on campus this early, it's a good first step. Building those relationships, entrenching those relationships, making sure you're in the game is very, very important. All right, folks, we'll be back tomorrow. We're going to start Pitt football camp ramp up, and we're going to talk all about. I'm going to talk standouts. I'm going to talk about guys. We're going to have interviews. We're going to have all the 9. We're going to have everything you could possibly want here tomorrow on the Locked On Pitt podcast, and everything is going to be crack-a-lacking out here. We're going to go like this over the next month before West Virginia comes to town. As always, folks, thanks for listening, and as always, hail to Pitt.